Greetings, viewers. Eric the Car Guy here, back again with another show where I answer your automotive questions live on this Google Plus event. Now, it's a special night because Advance Auto has given us an extra half hour. So I will be answering questions for an entire hour this evening, thanks to Advance Auto. A few things before I get started. First, I will be taking the questions from the Google Plus event, number 46 to be precise, that's where I'll be taking the questions from. Questions that are posted to the YouTube video of this, once this is all complete, I won't be able to answer those because I can't see those. The YouTube video is complete, so apologies for that. Also, any questions posted to the event after the event concludes, I won't be answering those as well because, well, the event would be over. However, we have somewhat of a unique situation tonight in that there aren't a lot of questions. You got other things to do? Come on, I've never seen it like this. I've never seen this small amount of questions, so we'll see. I've got some ideas as far as where I can go grab some more, but hey, we're doing this now, and if you're watching or if you got automotive questions, fire away. But with all that said, oh, and here's the other thing, I do these every other week, so the next show will actually be on the 22nd. So if you missed tonight, there'll be the 22nd. But like I said, I need your questions. Post them now. Anyway, I'm gonna get started here. Oh yeah, and I sometimes mess up your name, so apologies for that in advance. I will try very hard not to do that. But then we have people that come up with these weird handles like Rotor, it's like Roto, and then a capital R, cool, Cole, not sure. Anyway, let's, his question. Hey Eric, great channel. Sorry for my English, but I have a question about my car. I have a RAV4 with 160,000 miles, and when I run the car at third speed, it stills in the shift and doesn't change to 4-speed, or it changes to neutral. Moreover, how can I find a short circuit because the next day my battery appears dead? I forgot that it's an automatic transmission. Okay, first we'll start with the transmission issue. Given that it sounds like, based on, you know, and your English is okay, I'm actually not so great myself, especially with spelling. It's going into what appears to be neutral when it tries to shift rather than going into the next year. Many modern automatic, well, just about everyone I can think of, automatic transmission has some form of electronic shifting associated with it. So there's always a possibility that there could be an electrical problem causing it not to shift correctly. One of the ways that I determine whether or not it's an electrical problem or if it's a mechanical problem is first look to see if you have a check engine light on. If you have a check engine light on, pull that code. That code may be a good indication as to what might be going on with the transmission. Maybe there's a sensor that's not functioning. Other engine sensors can actually affect how the transmission shifts. So, like I said, if there's any check engine lights on, explore those first because they're a very good clue. But if you don't have any check engine lights on and you're experiencing something like this, like it's trying to go into gear, but it's not able to, that sort of clicks a light bulb off in my head and says, well, this may possibly be a mechanical issue, which means possibly clutches inside the transmission, use of fourth gear, could be worn out, or there could be a leaking seal internally. Basically boils down to an internal mechanical issue with the transmission that's not going to be solved through electrical repairs. You're either going to have to, well, my recommendation in that case, if you find a mechanical problem with an automatic transmission, is to basically replace it with a remanufactured unit. As far as automatic transmission repairs for the DIY, I think the success rate with that would be relatively low. So I wouldn't try to attempt that. I would go for something that's remanufactured with a warranty. You can try the salvage yard. That's a less expensive option. However, it's a used transmission. You don't know how many miles are on it. You know how it was driven, if it was overheated. So you may be taking out a bad transmission and replacing it with a marginal transmission. You end up with the same problem in the not too distant future. So don't be penny wise and pound foolish in this sense, and look for a remanufactured transmission if it boils down to that. If you got check engine lights, check those codes, see what you got first. As for your battery going dead, it seems to be also a concern. This is commonly referred to as a parasitic draw. And what that means is after you've turned the vehicle off, somewhere there's something that's drawing power from the battery and draining it down while it sits over a period of time. The way to check for this, I've actually done a video about it. is to hook up an ammeter between, let's see, disconnect the positive cable, or you could actually do the positive or the negative cable. Can't remember which one's best at the moment for whatever reason. Anyway, the only way to check amps is to tie in series. Now, this is where it gets tricky. A lot of meters have two settings for amps. They may have a 10 amp setting and then another setting for milliamps. So always start out with the highest amp rating on your meter, and put it in series in between the battery cable and the terminal on the battery, and look for a draw. And with that, oh shoot, what was it? It's like 0.05. Why is this escaping me now? I guess it's been a while since I've done a parasitic draw test. But you don't want anything more than half an amp. In fact, that's actually pretty too much. Why can I not think of that now? But anyway, okay, so watch the video. I will put a link in the description to the video, which has all the correct numbers and everything in it. But basically what you're doing is you're looking for a draw and seeing if it's significant. If it's definitely like 2 or 3 amps, you got way too much, and that's going to flatten the battery out. The way to determine what circuit is affected is you pull the fuses one at a time. And once that amp drop goes away, well, every time you pull a fuse, make sure you check the meter and make sure that, you know, it has dropped or it hasn't dropped. Once you pull a fuse and you find that it drops significantly, that's the affected circuit. Next step, find a wiring diagram for that circuit and find out all the different systems that are on it. There could be multiple systems on the same fuse. So in that sense, what you want to do is perhaps go connector hunting for a connector that goes to a specific component and unplug that. Just to make it easy for you, a lot of times I find parasitic draws involve like lighting in some way, shape, or form. And it could be like a dome light or a trunk light, something like that, and maybe a switch that's not working correctly and it leaves one of those lights on, and that causes a draw. So look for those things. Also, it's important not to have the door open when you're doing the test, because that, or block off or close this or open the switch for the dome light, because if you have the door open or something that's going to turn the dome light on while you're doing your testing, basically you're going to get false positives because you're creating a draw with that door that's open. As I said, all the specifics are covered in that video that I'll post a link to. I sound a lot more intelligent there than I do right now, so I'm going to stop digging this hole and move on, point you to that video for that problem. So that's what I would do as far as a parasitic draw, and look for what's going on there. But you know what? I should have mentioned at the onset, before you do that, check your battery. If you have any kind of electrical problem, check the battery. Make sure that, you know, load test it. Make sure that the battery is capable of holding a charge, because if it's not, and you just got a bad battery, you're wasting your time trying to do parasitic draw testing when you really don't need to. You got to start with a good fully charged battery. Good fully charged battery, 12.6 volts. I do remember that one now. All right, moving on to Warren Butcher. He's got a 2005 Hyundai Tucson. Wipers in front and back work great, but when I want to mist, only the front work. Check all fuses and relays. Check for voltage at the connector. Have power for front mist, but no power for the back. I'm thinking it's the multi-switch, but it's $60. It's $60 for a mistake. If I'm wrong, I cannot find any schematics unless I want to buy them from a dealer for 120 bucks. Warren, I actually looked this up and looked up the wiring diagram, and it looks to me like the signal wire coming out of the switch is the gray wire. So if you're checking at the gray wire and you're flipping the switch to intermittent and you're not seeing a signal coming out of there, going to the intermittent relay on that system, then I would say it's the switch. So the switch is not sending a signal to the relay. If you are seeing a signal there, the next place I would look is that wiper relay and try to figure it out. But it almost sounds like you've got that, but it's the gray wire coming out of that switch. So if you see no signal coming out of that gray wire, I would agree that that's probably a problem with that switch and not necessarily with the intermittent relay. So give that a try. Peter Gustilla. Hey Eric, I have an 06 Civic EX. When I'm at a stoplight, my RPM needle jumps like it's going to shut off. I replaced my PCV valve and MAF sensor. I read it might have to relearn the PCM idle procedure, or maybe replace the EGR valve. The EGR runs about $100, so I cleaned it. That and the throttle body, still no luck. I'm so confused on what it can be. Please help. Thank you. Okay, EGR, unless it's stuck open, has no effect on idle whatsoever. I've covered this in previous videos. So if Don't go to the EGR. The only way the EGR can affect idle is if it's stuck open. And that doesn't often happen in my experience. So the EGR is not necessarily the first place I look. In your case, you replace the PCV valve and the MAF sensor. Okay. In your case, I would be looking to the idle control valve, perhaps, and also for vacuum leaks. If you have any vacuum leaks, like a leaking intake gasket or a vacuum line that's off or something like that, that will affect the idle. The engine won't be able to compensate for that extra air that's going in. The way it compensates is through the idle control valve. It's a little stepper motor that allows air to bypass the throttle plate so that it can keep the engine running. If this malfunctions and it's not letting the proper amount of air into the engine, it may not run correctly. One of my favorite tests for those is it's usually located on the throttle body. Remember, there's a passage. It's a controlled vacuum leak, so to speak, that goes past the throttle plate. So it'll be someplace near the throttle body. And you'll see it a lot of times mounted on the bottom. There's usually a couple of cooling lines going to it, or coolant lines. And I just tap on it with the handle of a screwdriver or my ratchet, something plastic, something that's not going to hurt it, while the engine's running. And as I do that, if the engine RPM changes or it has some kind of effect, that could indicate that there's a problem with that idle air control valve. But once again, you got to check for vacuum leaks. You gotta tick the boxes. You gotta eliminate other things. Hondas are particularly sensitive to air in the cooling system. So if you have air pockets in your cooling system, remember I said there was a couple of coolant lines that ran to that idle air control valve. If air gets trapped in there, that can sometimes also fool the coolant temperature sensor, which is also used to help calculate an idle mixture, and upset the whole thing. So I'd be looking for vacuum leaks. Also look for, if I didn't realize that one had a MAF sensor on it, but look for any leaks in the tube that goes from the back of the MAF sensor to the throttle body, because if there's any leaks there on a car with a MAF sensor, that's air that was unaccounted for by the MAF sensor, and that can also upset the air-fuel mixture. So there's a few things to check. In fact, I've written an extensive article on Honda idle issues. There will be a link to that down in the description, so please check there for a lot of other things on the list that I may have missed in my explanation here. But that's where I would look. As far as the relearn procedure, it's not common that Hondas need something like that. They oftentimes are pretty straightforward with that, but sometimes, like I say, vacuum leaks, that type of thing. PCV valves, I will say this, you say you replaced it. My experience with some aftermarket PCV valves on Hondas is they don't flow the same as the OE ones, and sometimes make the idle weird. So if you have an original equipment PCV valve on a Honda and you know that it's working, I would leave it alone, because you could end up causing another problem, and given that you're trying to solve one, you don't want to make more of them. Spaced Ghost Purples. I like that. Hey, Eric, I have a 1998 Acura Integra LS automatic B18B, 150,000 miles. There seems to be a rattle noise coming from the top of my engine. I'm positive it's the engine and not something loose, as I've checked all around the engine bay, and it sounds as if two pieces of metal are vibrating. If I'm parked or in neutral and not applying my foot on the gas, there is no rattle. But once I apply the gas, the rattle will start for a bit and then go away once I take my foot off the pedal and my RPMs drop. It will make a rattle noise for a bit and then go away. My Tech seems to drive as good as the day I bought it. It's just that annoying rattle now. What could it be? I'm thinking maybe a valve adjustment. Also, it overheated a while back, but that problem was fixed, and it didn't make the rattle until about a month after, I would say. Thank you for all you do, and stay dirty, my friend. Thank you. Okay, it's not the valves. If it was valves, it'd be rattling all the time, particularly under load. What you have, and this is my guess, what you have is basically the shields on your catalytic converter the attachments have rotted away. You have at least one, maybe two, that have come loose from the catalytic converter, and that's what's causing the buzzing noise. You described to a T a noise like this. In fact, I have a video on it, on how to fix it. And I just take hose clamps and put it around the whole catalytic converter and tighten them up, and rattle be gone. So it's a very inexpensive fix to do. Don't remove the shields entirely, particularly if you live in a hot, dry climate. One of the reasons they put those shields there is if you park on a grassy area and that grass is dry, it could possibly catch it on fire. So you want to avoid that. That's why the shielding is there. So don't remove the shielding if you can avoid it. That's why I put a clamp around the outside. It holds it fast and no longer vibrates. If it's not the catalytic converter, there are a couple of other pipes in the back there. It'd be hard pressed to believe that you have original equipment pipes on there, but that could also cause that. Now, if you have no shielding at all, and you have an aftermarket B pipe, that's the pipe that goes from the catalytic converter to the muffler, give it a tap with the palm of your hand and listen. If it rattles, the problem is inside the resonator, there's something that's not a muffler, it's just sort of a swollen spot inside the exhaust that's there. It's a double wall pipe. It's a pipe that's down inside there. And what can happen is that the welds for that pipe can break loose and cause that rattle, and you'll be chasing it around the exhaust and you won't be able to find it. This is how I fix that. I take a hammer, the ball peen hammer, the ball side, and I hammer around the outside of that resonator along the sides, and then maybe another one along the bottom. It has the same effect as that hose clamp. That pipe that's rattling around inside gets held fast by those dents on the outside of it. I know it sounds crazy, but it has worked. I just get under there and I wail on it with a hammer, put a couple of dents in it, pinch that pipe into place, rattle be gone. But normally I find that on aftermarket pipes. So that one I knew plenty about, but I don't think it's the valves. If it was the valves, it'd be rattling all the time. So, and if you're not used to doing valve adjustments, I do not recommend doing valve adjustments or practicing, because if you get it wrong, you could actually burn up the exhaust valves in particular. And if you do that, you'll be taking the cylinder head off. Also, it can really mess with the idle. But I have done a video on a valve adjustment on that engine. Should you care to venture in that direction, it can walk you through the process if nothing else. But I'd be looking for an exhaust rattle in your case. Abdullah Adubaga. Sorry, I can't do that last one, but I think I've seen you here before. Hey, Eric, I just bought a brand new Hyundai Accent, and I was wondering if you have to change the oil in 1,000 miles. The owner's manual doesn't state any special lubricant in the oil to keep. And I read in Hyundai forum that it's good to change the oil for the first 1,000 because you never know how long the car sat. Thanks for everything you do. Stay dirty. All right, to summarize this question that I somewhat butchered, he bought a brand new Hyundai, and it has about 1,000 miles on it. He's asking if he should change the oil. Now, in the past, I've done a video with oil experts and posed the same question to them. And there is the consensus that many times, especially on a brand new engine, that the oil or there's some additive in there that has a bit more zinc. And the zinc actually helps with lubricating properties of an oil mixture like that. And it has to do with break-in of the engine. And there's a whole process. There may be a process in your owner's manual that Hyundai wants you to go through in order to properly break in the engine. Normally it's about 500 miles, varying the RPM range. Manual transmission vehicles, it's really great because it does vary the RPM range every time you shift. So you're revving it up, you push in the clutch, RPMs fall, you put it in next gear, you rev it up. That's great to break in an engine. Now, with yours, as far as the 1,000 miles, and you bring up a good point as far as how long it sat, the oil will tend to settle out, but once you start it up and run it, it should all be good again. I don't think that that's a concern, honestly. I would wait until the scheduled interval. I would not necessarily recommend changing it soon, even if it did sit in there, because as I said, once you start moving the oil around again, if any of that stuff did settle out, and I believe it does take a significant amount of time before the additives in the oil start to settle out. I don't think it's an issue. I would wait and change the oil at the recommended interval is what I would do. I don't know if they would state if there are additives in the oil in a new car or not. They used to in some owner's manuals, but the owner's manuals, even though they've gotten thicker, seem to have a lot less information these days. I mean, it takes like half the manual to tell you how to work the stereo, it seems. But that being said, I would wait. I wouldn't say that you have to do it at 1,000 miles. That seems a little bit soon to me. Santiago Morales, hey Eric, greetings from Panama City. Mitsubishi Montero 3.5 liter engine. When I start the car for the first time in the day, the power steering assistance is okay. When the car is getting to operating temperature, the assistance is less and less to the point of no assistance. If I put the car in park or neutral and rev to 1,500 or 2,000 RPM while I'm cutting the wheels, the assistance of power steering is fine. If I stop rev, the assistance goes away. When I'm driving, the assistant is fine. The difficult part is when I try to park or steer the wheel when the car is stopped. I check the belt. It's not slipping or making any noise. The tension is okay. The tensioner is new. I changed the fluid. The old fluid was very black. The power steering pump is not making noise either. Could this be a bad power steering pump? Thanks in advance. It's an excellent question, and you didn't post the year that I could see. So I'm not sure how old the vehicle is or necessarily how many miles are on it, but judging by the fluid, I'm going to say that the fluid was in there for some time. That's a good question, because the assist is sometimes controlled electronically, and I'm not sure on that vehicle if it is or not. So there could be something electronic going on, and if there was, I would almost think that there would be a check engine light indicating that there was an issue there. It sounds like it's capable of giving you power assist, but as you said, as it warms up, it changes. So I'm wondering if, like I said, you didn't post a year. I could have looked it up or something like that with this. I'm not so sure about a power steering pump. I think there's some control, because power steering pumps, in my experience, don't often go bad, and when they do go bad, it's pretty definitive. Whereas power steering racks or the controls, sometimes there's a speed sensor, sometimes it's mechanical, and sometimes it's electronic that helps with the assist, and maybe through valving inside the power steering rack. Normally, when I run into issues like this, I'm looking at the power steering rack or something that controls the assist. So for your system, I would probably see if I can get my hands on a service manual to see how that assist is handled. And there may be some control somewhere, could be electronic, that's contributing to the issue that you're having. But I'm not convinced that it would be the power steering pump itself right out of the gate. I would be looking for either mechanical or electronic device that actually controls the assist on that vehicle is where I'd be turning my attention. But, great start with changing the fluid, because a lot of times power steering issues of this type I find are fluid related. As the fluid gets old, it just sort of breaks down, and a good fluid flush can do wonders for a power steering system. It's often neglected. I also have a video on flushing power steering systems. I will post a link to that in the description. Not that that's going to help you. It sounds like you've already taken care of that. And as I said, I don't think that's the issue. I think you're looking at some form of control that's coming into play or not coming into play in your case. Okay, Whitney Dodson. Hey, Eric, I've experienced this while my wife is driving her Ford Flex. I've looked on ETCG, but I can't seem to find where it's talked about. During acceleration and braking, it seems like the car auto transmission hesitates for a second sometimes. I haven't personally noticed it during braking, but I asked her to describe it to me, and she asked if it was just during acceleration. And asked if it was just during acceleration. I noticed that when we're driving down the road, the vehicle seems to lose power for an instant, but remains but regains just as quickly. 73,000 miles, oil, trans, brake, power steering fluids all look good. I looked this up actually to see if this was some sort of pattern failure or common problem before the show. And I did find something about the oil being low, possibly, and once again, you didn't post a year, so I just generally threw it in there. I think I threw it in as a 2010. It did mention something about low oil, and because that affects the cam phasers on that engine. So if there's low oil pressure or just low oil in the engine, it can affect that. However, I would think that would be associated with a check engine light. You didn't mention whether or not you had a check engine light. Many times, especially with newer vehicles, problems like this are pretty quick to turn on that light. Since you don't have that light, you don't really kind of have a clue as to where to look, because maybe it's the transmission dropping out for a second, maybe it's not. One other thing I saw was the possibility of PCM, ECM issue, possibly not sending correct signals, but that was only one instance, and it did look promising. Unfortunately, if you just have the hesitation and you can't associate it with anything like the transmission or the engine, you don't know if it's the transmission or the engine. And that's the next steps that you've got to do. You've got to determine if that hesitation is due to an engine problem, or perhaps the transmission is not shifting correctly, or something of that nature. It's almost impossible for me to come up with anything but a long list of possibilities for you. Down in the description, I will post a link to my diagnosing performance issues that should be able to help you at least hopefully narrow that down. Nathan Rothbun, ETCG, I have narrowed down my passenger side front wheel wobble to the carrier bearing. That's pretty specific. Only after replacing several other front-end components. Since I do not want my car unusable for a while, I found a replacement manual tranny that I pulled from a salvage yard. Can you recommend what bearings or components of a manual tranny should be replaced before I place it in the car? Other than obviously worn out parts, I'm definitely replacing both carrier bearings and seals. 2001 Honda Accord, sedan 2.3 liter F23A1 engine and P2A8 transmission. Okay, those transmissions don't often have issues. Every once in a while I see problems with the carrier bearings, but a lot of times that's associated with like a collision problem, improper fluid inside the transmission. If you're going to a salvage yard and you're just taking one out and put one in, why not just trust it and put it in and see? I mean, it's a manual transmission, so those aren't nearly as hateful as an automatic transmission to get in and out of there. But there are times, and this may be one of those times where, because those carrier bearings are pressed on to that differential assembly. If you don't get them off of there properly, if you don't press them back together, then you could end up creating a problem where there was none. So this is one of those situations where if you're swapping something out, one transmission for another one, see what happens. And I would strongly recommend use Honda fluid, or I have found GM Synchromesh transmission fluid works pretty good in Honda transmissions. In fact, I've actually had it quiet down bearing noises. So if you have a Honda manual transmission and it's having some bearing noise, try GM Synchromesh transmission fluid. It might just help. So it's something I've had experience with. But yeah, carrier bearings, I would be checking the intermediate drive shaft if you haven't already, because there's a bearing in that sometimes goes bad and causes a vibration. I've seen lots of vibrations caused by axles. Sometimes, well, actually, a lot of aftermarket axles sometimes cause that. Although they've seemed to have gotten quite a bit better recently than they have been in the past. Inner CV joints can sometimes cause weird vibrations, things like that. But carrier bearings, and by the way, suspension components don't cause vibrations. It's rotating assembly, so it's something that's rotating. So if you replaced a bunch of stuff like suspension parts, stabilizer links, all that's nothing to do with vibrations. It can make them worse if they're loose, but it doesn't cause vibrations. It's things that spin. It creates a resonance. It hits a certain frequency and it starts to vibrate. That's why we balance our tires, so that we can help eliminate those things. But actually, number one thing to look at is tires. So I hope you look there as well. Since there's not a lot of questions, I will answer this question. Augustin Caesar question: if you were to travel, I'm sorry, I'm stepping on the carpet and moving it. If you were to travel, to South America with the Fairmont, let's say you are going on vacation to a place where gas is really cheap. I guess you know that by the time I'm done with the Fairmont, I'll be burning lots of it. Which tools would you carry? You are absolutely certain that this will help you out of the most trouble. Name 5. Can be a single tool or a set of tools, or a combined just 5. If we're talking the Fairmont, it doesn't take a whole lot of tools. Basic set of hand tools, like basic set of sockets, basic set of wrenches, screwdrivers, flathead, Phillips. It's about all I need with that thing. I mean, it's all mechanical, old school stuff. I don't need a scan tool, anything. It's just tools. Stuff to change the tire, which should be in the trunk with the spare tire. So, and that's already there. If I'm traveling to other countries, though, I'd be taking some spare fuel filters with me, because I never know what's going to come out of there. So, and those are, once again, easy to replace on the Fairmont. So Fairmont, easy car. Newer cars, man, it's a little bit different, but yeah, who knows? So I hope that answers your question. Only because we had time did I cover that. Mostly I just go for the automotive questions. Tony Ray, working on my 1989 Dodge van with a V250 with a 318, won't run, but it's getting gas to the carb. As I took the line off the carb to check, is there a sensor that controls idle and start up fuel? 89 carbureted, that is probably one of those highly vacuum line emissions type carburetors that they're on there. But to my knowledge, there isn't necessarily a sensor. I'm not sure if they were running the ASD relays back then. No, I don't think they were. Not if you got a carburetor, because I'm suspecting a mechanical fuel pump. So you're getting fuel, but have you checked for spark? Have you taken off one of the spark plug boots? And either the best thing to do is put a spark plug tester in there, or you can try a screwdriver and hold it close to ground and see if you've got spark coming out of there, because you also need that. You also need the engine to have some kind of mechanical integrity, meaning that it has to be able to draw in a vacuum. So if, say, the timing is off, not necessarily ignition timing, mechanical timing, like you got a lot of slack in your timing chain, or maybe it jumped, or not real sure, excuse me. So yeah, it has to be able to draw in air. It also has to have spark. So if you don't have either of those two things, fuel is just one component. You need the other two to keep going the rest of the way. So I'm going to post a link in the description to a no start article that I wrote that covers many of the basics as far as checking for these things, including some videos and things that are thrown in there just for good measure. But we are at about the halfway point, and I want to remind you, yes, this is a special hour-long show where I answer your automotive questions thanks to Advance Auto. So I'll put a link to them in the description. You can go check them out and all the kind of cool things that they have. You can actually order parts online and go pick them up at the store and stuff. So it's kind of cool. Moving along. Hopefully we get some more questions in here. Post them. Post the questions, people. Chris Rocha. Hope to see you in a couple weeks, Chris, at the meetup. Eric, an update on my Hyundai. It looks like our lovely Ohio rust got to its underbelly. Turns out the fuel tank needs changed along with some brake lines. I left my headlights on last and ran the battery completely dead. Oddly enough, the check engine light has not returned. Pretty much planning on letting the car go due to lack of tools and funds. Hope to see you at the meetup. Although due to finances, we may not make it. Oh, that would suck. Sucks because the last two were awesome. Yeah, Chris has been coming since almost the first one. Oh, so this is just an update. It turns out his problem, I believe in the last show, I can't remember, had some performance problems, but sounds like the rust got to it and beat it up a little bit. That's too bad. All right, Michael Stewart, tell me, Eric, when can we see the way you used to be? Oh, Michael. Or yeah, Mitchell. Sorry, didn't mean to mispronounce your name. I'm gonna go there with it. Obviously, you haven't been watching the show, because if you had, you would see plenty of repair videos posted on Fridays. Tyler Clevenger. Eric, I have a 2006 Ford F-150 4x4 with a 4.6 liter V8 auto transmission with just over 100,000 miles. I've noticed a strong vibration, almost like the wheels are trying to lock up from the rear of the truck when turning at low speeds. Interesting. This started after using four-wheel drive. I suspected as much. The system seems to cycle fine. However, the cycling to four-wheel drive only engage the front drive and has no effect on the rear at all. Can the problem with the rear gears cause this? And is there anything to look for when I pull off the cover of the rear end? Or could something else cause a symptom like this? Thanks for the videos and stay dirty. Okay, I wouldn't go looking to the rear end necessarily. What would be awesome is if you could somehow get all four wheels up off the ground. Four-wheel drives present particular challenges in this sense. Having lift is awesome, but you could also raise it up on jack stands, all four wheels, get them all up off the ground, and then you'll know what wheels are actually turning. But the first thing that came to my mind when you said that was that the four-wheel drive is not disengaging. And I do see this from time to time because four-wheel drive doesn't always get used, and sometimes things get stuck. And what controls that is there's two things. The transfer case, which on the back of the transmission, there's a transfer case. And what the transfer case does is it not only sends power to the rear wheels through the drive shaft, but it also piggybacks and sends power to the front wheels via drive shaft. Then the front differentials has to lock in and engage those front wheels as well. And on newer vehicles, they many times use electronic devices to do this, electronic/mechanical devices to accomplish this. So it could be something in that system that is not releasing. I would suspect something with the front wheels, because what you describe is driving a four-wheel drive on dry pavement, having it in four-wheel drive. the front wheels tend to hop. So if you're in four-wheel drive on anything but like wet pavement or snow and ice or dirt, mud, that kind of thing, what happens is those front wheels tend to hop as you're turning. So it sounds to me like actually the front wheels are not disengaging, and you can confirm this by putting it in two-wheel drive while the thing is off the ground, all four wheels, as I said. So all four wheels up off the ground is what I would look for, and then engage and disengage the four-wheel drive and see if that works. I've sometimes had luck taking it out and putting it all the way down to the four low, which hardly ever gets used, and just flooring it, matting it, and then, because with four low, many times what you have to do is stop, put it in neutral, and then switch it into four low. Sometimes that works, sometimes. But when things get rusted up and they haven't been used a lot of times things like that happen. But it could also be an electronic issue. So if you have perhaps a check engine light, perhaps, that says four-wheel drive module, blah, 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 you know, improper signal, whatever, maybe that has something to do with it. I'm not sure. But it sounds to me like the four-wheel drive is not disengaging. And I would try to first confirm that, and then second, check to see if it's a problem inside the transfer case not being engaged to send power to the front wheels. But I wouldn't start taking apart differentials just yet, especially the rear differential, because I would say that's not likely to be that one, because rear differential pretty much gets power all the time. It's only the front that's turned on and off. So when it's in two-wheel drive, it's normally just the front wheels that are active, not normally just the rear wheels that are active, not the front wheels. So you engage the front wheels when you engage four-wheel drive. Michael Stackenstein, hey Eric, I ask a lot of mechanics this question, and I'm curious how you go about it as well. How do you handle customers who want to put a lot of money into a car that the company is either bankrupt and or repairs exceed the value of the car, and their only attachment is sentimental? Well, that's a good question, Michael, because I believe you watched my show and you've seen the Fixing It Forward series. And I think you've mentioned on more than one occasion that the Chrysler van that I've been working on is not worth it. In fact, I said the exact same thing when I started, that it's probably not worth investing into. It's probably too far gone. But there were other reasons, reasons that I pursued that vehicle. But as far as customers go, obviously if that van came into my shop as a paying customer, I would have said, you know what, let's look for another vehicle for you. But this was an opportunity, and it all kind of fell into place. I'm very happy with the result. Barbara's happy with her van. She's been driving it now for a little bit. There's still more videos to come on that, but she's driving it. So yes, there was a lot of effort. A lot of people came in and helped out with that project. But yes, I would have advised at that point that, you know, hey, maybe we should start looking for another vehicle. It really is, it's kind of a simple formula, really. You look at what the vehicle is worth, and you look at the cost of the repairs. If the cost of the repairs exceed the cost of the vehicle, if you sold it tomorrow, it's not a good investment financially, period. But then again, there's a lot of people in the position where, okay, that's not a good financial investment, but it's still less money than buying a new vehicle. You know, even though it may be good money over bad, and there may be problem after problem after problem. So there really is no changing people's minds. You talked about sentimental reasons. If they've got their mind made up that that's what they want to have, maybe their mom gave them the car, maybe their mom passed away, and that's all they have to remind them of that. You know, there's lots of reasons for sentimental attachments. And I just basically report whatever facts that I find, and I try to give them as much information as I possibly can, because none of us can predict the future. None of us know what's down the road, or, you know, how deep those attachments are. So I try not to judge and just try to give them what they want. I mean, the customer's always right. At the end of the day, that's it. It's not up to you. If you're being paid to service a vehicle, you can advise and say, I don't advise you to fix this car, but this is how much it'll be if you want me to fix it. That's that. Hope that answers your question. Nick Bruns, sorry. Eric, you're amazing. Not necessarily, but thanks. My wife's 1999 Ford Escort ZX2, cool, 2-liter Z-Tech, 5-speed, 142,000 miles, makes a strange noise from the transmission. The clutches are getting old, but it's making an almost frightening noise. I can hear it when I'm driving past a wall or a center divider or when shifting gears when the clutch is depressed. The sound is almost like a root-style supercharger blower. Well, that's actually kind of cool. But at higher pitch, like opening a zipper really fast. Is this the throwout bearing eating the transmission input shaft or something else? Also, your opinion on my 2002 Subaru Legacy GT 2.5 dual overhead cam at 118,000 miles. It had an oil leak, half a quart every 2,000 miles. So I took it to a mechanic, thought it would be something small, but they handed me a $2,000 estimate to do the head gaskets. Do head gaskets leak oil? It's just starting to use coolant as well. Thanks. Keep up the great work. Well, that's actually 2 questions, Nick, but I'll do my best here. As for the noise, I'm not so sure throwout bearing. It might be like main shaft bearing or something of that nature. Not hearing the noise, very difficult, but you were very good in describing it, your supercharger type noise. So that says rotating type of noise to me. The first thing I would try, you said, I think somewhere in here that you said that your clutch was getting old. You said your clutch was getting old, but it's not necessarily slipping yet. If that's the case and your clutch still has some life left in it, you might just try changing the fluid in the transmission to see if the noise changes or goes away. Sometimes that'll fix it. Sometimes, not saying all the time, but sometimes that'll fix it. But the number one thing takeaway here is make sure you use the correct fluid for that transmission. That information can be found in the service manual, or a lot of times I've had luck calling up the parts department of a store, like say Advance Auto, and say, hey, what kind of fluid does this transmission take? And they tell me, okay, this calls for blah, blah, blah. So they have a lookup and they can check what type of fluid goes in there, and also many times tell you how much you need to buy. That might be a good start for that noise. Now, as far as your oil leak, if it's a 2.5 liter, yes, it is. They are kind of famous for head gasket problems. In fact, Brian's Mobile One has some good videos about doing all that work that you might want to just check out just to see what's involved with it. And he's quite good with those Subarus. But that being said, it is a common issue on that engine to have head gasket problems. So I'm not saying that their diagnosis is incorrect or leaking oil. I have seen external oil leaks at head gaskets, but knowing the history of the 2.5 liter Subaru of that vintage, well, it might just be what you're looking at. It might just be par for the course. But that's who I would check with. I'd check out some of Brian's Mobile One videos on that exact issue. Oh, we still got plenty of time. Jonathan Ritter has a 99 Saturn SL1 1.9 liter auto with 171,000 miles. It always burned oil, but since I started using a name brand oil with a cleaning agent, it burns more oil, about 1.5 liters per 3,000 miles. I've switched to the high mileage oil recently. Would changing the piston rings be the next step, or the engine? Don't waste your time on piston rings on a worn out engine. It's not like just piston rings get worn out on an engine. Everything wears out. It's very difficult to go in just with a targeted approach and just replace bearings or just replace rings. I mean, geez, if you're in there, you're in there. Do it. Measure it out. Blueprint it. Make sure it all is right. If you're not hip to that, if you don't have the tools to do that or the know-how to do that, recommend Reman. Reman saves your butt so many times. It saves our butts as mechanics so many times because we don't have to spend the time and effort to try and do it right. We put it off on somebody else. They put a warranty on it. We install it, fill out the paperwork. You got a warranty for X amount of time for short block. Yeah, I would think with something like that, maybe short block. I'm not real sure how you go. Or maybe they'd come out with a long block and you'd have a cylinder head and everything, and you just have to swap over all your parts. That's my favorite, really. In fact, the Chevy S10 or the GMC Sonoma that I did a couple years back, that's what I did with it. Thing's been running great ever since. Hasn't missed a beat. So that's what I recommend. I don't recommend rebuilding something unless it's a rare vehicle or something special, something that needs special love, or an older vehicle. I plan to go through the engine on the Fairmont and to try to show as much detail as possible as far as what it takes to actually get in there and measure things out and see, a blueprinted engine to see how everything is fitting together, if all the clearances are correct. Those clearances are critical to oil pressure. If you don't get that right, your oil pressure, not going to be there. Let's see. Now we've got some debate on the Saturn, whether or not to keep a Saturn. I think that might have been what Michael was speaking to. Like, why would you fix a Saturn? Because they're no longer around. Well, they were General Motors, and they'll still be parts around for those for a while. I'm driving a '93 Vigor. Come on, they only made like 30-some thousand of those things total that they imported here to the States, and that thing is seriously hard to find parts for. But Saturns, I don't think you're gonna have problems finding parts for Saturns for a while. Brennan Tippy, hey Eric, I have a 2002 Ford Escape. What is it? XLT V5 3.0. I've had a bad misfire, which has been caused by bad coils. Fixed everything up, but the cats were clogged. I gutted the cats, but still have the check engine light. Is it because the catalyst deficiency, I believe? Have you ever used spark plug spacers so that the cold will go away? Light gets annoying after a while. Thanks. Love your videos. They've helped me a lot. Stay dirty. Okay. Well, as a professional technician, I don't do that. I mean, come on, I don't do it because I don't do it. So if you've gutted the cats, and yes, it's looking for to see if the catalytic converter is working, and obviously it's not, well, you're gonna have a check engine light. So I've never used those products that you're talking about, nor do I advocate their use. I understand their use, but it's not something I can get behind. So I don't know what to tell you on this. It's something I can't endorse. But if that's what you want to do, it's your car, and that's what you need to do, then yeah. Let's see. Well, there's other people answering other questions. Steve Z has a '69 Ford Mustang base model with a 351 Windsor and a 3-speed manual transmission. I'm jealous. The clutch throwout bearing keeps wearing out. I took it to the trans shop, and they replaced the throwout bearing and adjusted the clutch. They said the clutch wasn't adjusted properly, and that's why the bearing burned up. I drove the car about 3,000 miles after the repair, and the same thing happened. The throwout bearing started to make a screeching noise when the pedal was depressed. What could be the cause of the throwout bearing that keeps wearing out? My first question is, do you have a performance clutch in the car? If you do, well, performance clutch is got great holding power, but it takes a lot more effort to depress the clutch pedal with a performance clutch. So if you have a performance clutch and you're running like a standard throwout bearing, maybe that's the problem. Maybe you need a throwout bearing that's more stout. If you're just running a stock clutch and the throwout bearings keep burning up, first thing I would say, well, where are we getting the throwout bearings from? Are these quality parts? Are these good parts? Are these parts that we can trust? Because if it's the same one, it's happening over and over again. We ask ourselves, why do we keep taking the transmission out to replace this throwout bearing? As far as clutch misadjustment causing this can cause it, because it's commonly believed that you want to tighten it up rather than loosen it up, when actually you want to increase pedal free play. So you want it to have a little bit of play so that throwout bearing is not constantly in contact with those pressure plate fingers. You want it to sit back a little bit, because if it is constantly in contact, then that throwout bearing is constantly working. It should only be working as the clutch pedal is being depressed. So that could be coming into play here. So my questions is what kind of throwout bearing are we using? Also, I'm wondering, is with the kind of shape that the nose on the transmission, what the throwout bearing rides on the front of the transmission, if that is in good order. Because if that's worn, then the throwout bearing won't have a smooth operation along that part of the transmission. And if it doesn't, it could cause it to chatter, it could cause it to hang up, could cause it to stick in a certain spot and stay engaged with that pressure plate and those fingers of the pressure plate, thus causing it to overheat and fail. So a couple of questions there. I would be looking at that system as a whole. Also, the shift fork, is it bent? Maybe one of the fingers is a little bit farther over than another one, and it's not being able to apply evenly. Hard to say. But my first question is what parts are you using? And if they are aftermarket go fast race parts, then that could have something to do with it. Not sure. Jesse Silva, hey Eric, my friend has a '99 Honda CRV with 200,000 miles. When he's driving through the parking lot, it died on him. No check engine light. came on or anything. The temp was fine, but now the car will just crank and not start. It's weird. I don't know if there are a lot of CRVs out there, but I get asked this question about CRVs, I think, more than anything. Honda CRVs tend to have this problem. And 99, first thing I'd be checking is main relay, especially on hot days. Although main relays don't usually cause Hondas to die. Cause them not to start doesn't usually cause them to die. What causes them to die many times is the igniters in the distributor. And it just so happens I have a very detailed video on how to check the coils and the igniters in a Honda ignition system. And a 99 is the older style. So that video will apply. In fact, it's the same engine. It's on an Acura Integra that I do the test on. Oh, wait a minute. It's on a Honda Civic that I do the test on. It's a very similar distributor to the one you have. All the wire colors and everything are the same that you're looking at. So that's what I would look at. My guess would be an ignition coil or an igniter that is causing that not to start. So first thing to check, really easy, check for spark. Pull one of the spark plug boots out, hook a spark tester up to it, or like I said earlier, you can take a screwdriver, put it in the spark plug boot and try to hold it close to a ground, have somebody crank the engine. If you see a spark coming off of there, then you need to look elsewhere for the problem. But my guess is you're not going to see a spark there. And if you don't see a spark there, the next thing is to determine if the igniter is not telling the coil to fire or if the coil is not capable of firing. Once you know that, you know whether you need a coil or an igniter. Once again, that's covered in detail in the video that I will post a link to in the description. By the way, give me like, I don't know, a half hour or so to get those together, because obviously, especially with these hour-long shows, I'm going to be posting a lot more links there. And maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to look some other things up. All right, Nicholas Uribe, bro, I have a big question. I have a Kia Sportage 2007, and I just went 100,000 miles, and it's starting to make a banging noise when I turn the wheel. We have changed ball joints, upper and lower arms. The problem started when I changed the struts. What is your opinion? I think you just answered your own question, Nicholas. Sorry. It happened after you changed the struts. I'll be looking at the bearing plates. You said, let's see, making a banging noise when I turn the wheel. That's where I'd be looking. You changed the struts. Maybe you didn't get the spring in the correct position, and as you're turning the wheel, it's binding. Or as I said, it could be like those upper bearing plates that could be a problem. It depends. Like maybe if you use like quick struts, it comes as a complete assembly, and it's just a matter of taking something out and putting something in. However, if you actually took the spring off the strut and put a new strut inside the old spring, like I said, there may have been a problem with assembly. Anytime you have an issue after you perform a repair, the first thing that's suspect is the work that you did. I'm guilty. I've done it myself. I've done things and been like, oh, darn it, I should have done that, or this is why you test drive the vehicles when you're done, just to verify that you've done the repair properly, because things like this do come up. So it could have been the parts you used, could have been the installation, not real sure, but first thing that comes to mind is look at the work that you did and see where you're at. Let's see, Mike Brascoop. Sorry, dude. Hey, Eric, I have a 2011 Dodge Ram pickup with a 5.7 liter Hemi. Around 40 to 50 miles per hour while decelerating, I hear a tick, tick, tick noise that seems to be coming from the front of the engine and immediately goes away when you accelerate. What do you think is causing this noise? All I can do is guess on this. And timing chain? Maybe you got a tensioner going bad? Hard to say. 2011 might have, has sensors on the camshafts. If it gets bad enough, it might throw a code for that. Could be anything, man. It could have nothing to do with the engine. It could be something else. Noises, I've written an entire article about chasing noises down, and I have spent days, literally days, chasing down noises before. And Steelman Chassis Air was actually quite helpful in that instance. And what that is a series of microphones that you can sort of clip to different parts that you suspect are making noise. And you sort of flip a switch and go between each one to find out if you found the affected area. But noises, especially reading them in a this type of setting, it's really difficult to diagnose. And that timing chain thing was just off the cuff. So I'm not saying that that has anything to do with anything. Wow, lots of you did post questions. I was thinking I was running out, but okay, we got time for a few more. Let's see, where were we? All right, not going to answer tool questions here. I'm going to stick with the automotive questions. Hey Eric, let's see. Punch Maxi 1988. What would you say too much engine oil on an engine is? No, wait, hang on a second. Would you say too much engine oil on an engine is bad as too little oil? I've had the dealer add too much oil after a service. I removed 1 liter of oil. Yes, too much oil is as bad as not having enough. This is why. The crankcase has a certain level that's set by the manufacturer. They say, put this much oil in. Now, if you go above that, you go far enough above that, that oil can come into contact with the spinning crankshaft. Once it does, the crankshaft whips the oil up into a meringue, which basically fills it up with air. Air is compressible. The oil is not. It's a liquid. You need the non-compressible liquid to be running through your engine. If it gets filled with air, it cannot lubricate properly, and therefore there's metal-to-metal contact of those parts inside the engine. It's just as bad as having no oil, as you point out. 1 liter is a lot, so that's too much. And as I don't know, I'd be talking to that dealer and asking him why there's that much more. I mean, a little bit over, okay. And this used to happen at the dealership where I worked all the time, because like the fill up on a Honda V6 is actually 4.7 quarts. It's not 5 quarts, it's 4.7 quarts. Yet we put 5 quarts in because they just clicked off at 5 quarts. It wasn't like 0.7 quarts, whatever. But that little 0.3 difference didn't make much of a difference. But a liter, that's a lot, and that's significant. So I would say that's no bueno. All right, Tony Ray. Hi again. I wrote about my 89 Dodge van not running on its own. It will run as long as I'm spraying into the carb, but will not idle on its own. That's why I was wondering if there was a bad idle sensor. Now, this was from earlier with the Dodge van that wouldn't run. So apparently you verified that it has spark, because it will run, but you have to keep spraying it. So it sounds to me like carburetor rebuild's in order. Something in that carburetor. I don't think it's a sensor, things like that. If it's carbureted, carburetors don't need map sensors and all that stuff. And I'm confused because I don't think you have a carb there. I think you might have throttle body injection. It looks like a carburetor, but it's not. And if that's the case, then you may not have sufficient fuel pressure. It could be caused by a clogged fuel filter or something of that nature. But if it has a carburetor, then there could be something going wrong with the carburetor. I've also done videos of carburetor rebuilds. So you might want to you might want to do something with that. So that's that was a strange time in automotive history, to where it was before fuel injection, but they were trying to conform to emission standards. So they made these Rube Goldberg setups to try to get these things to run. I hated working on those. I actually welcomed fuel injection. It made things a lot simpler, especially with self-diagnostic stuff. Let's see. Already answered that one. Mike, how did you post that so many times? Okay, we got time for like maybe one more. All right. Well, Sergio Lopez has a 2002 Jeep Cherokee V8. Had head gasket blow. The mechanic did a master rebuild engine. Do you think it was a good idea to invest $900 in it? Sort of covered that earlier when I talked about, what you would invest into a vehicle for sentimental reasons, things like that. It's worth it if it's worth it to you. We'll use that as our takeaway. Okay, Jimmy Dale Patter. Hey Eric, I have a 1995 Acura Integra LS with 128,000 miles. Had a blown head gasket, but that has been fixed. I doubt you had a blown head gasket. And the reason I say that is because they use steel gaskets on those, and steel head gaskets rarely ever have issues. So head gasket problems on that engine are extremely rare, and it's usually warped parts. It's not a head gasket problem. Anytime you have a steel head gasket, it's very rarely going to cause a problem like that. Anyway, I'm having problems with it starting up after it sits for a couple hours. I started up for the first time and it starts fine and idles at 500 RPM for a few seconds and stalls. After the first startup, it won't start unless I step on the gas pedal. Along with that, it stalls if I don't gas it. I've replaced the IAC, the fast idle thermal valve, fuel filter, the starter. I've checked for vacuum leaks, loose wires, hoses, fuel pressure regulator. It has no leaks. Fuel pump works. I'm just not sure what else to do. Anytime you've got that much work with a quote-unquote head gasket, there's always a possibility you plug something in wrong. And one of the things that I would be checking is, well, maybe that's just on Accords, because there was, on some Hondas, they had two connectors that were similar. One went to the IAC and the other went to a sensor, the air temperature sensor, and they both were the same connectors, but they were different colors. And there was enough wire where you could mix them up. When you did, it caused a problem similar to this. You say you check for vacuum leaks and that type of thing, and you're holding the gas pedal. So also super critical that you bleed the air out of the cooling system. In fact, I've had lots of people replace head gaskets thinking they had a head gasket issue when really all it was air in the cooling system. So it's imperative on that engine that you bleed the air out of the cooling system. If not, it will cause running problems because the coolant temperature sensor will not get accurate readings. Therefore, your fuel mixture will be off. If your fuel mixture is off, it will not run correctly and could possibly stall. Going to point you down into the description to a article that I wrote about idle problems. I cover Hondas specifically, go through, tick off all the boxes on what you got, and hopefully you can find a solution within that. Well, I'm going to say, yeah, we are at 8 o'clock. So I am going to wrap this one up. I mean, I'm glad everybody jumped in and started asking the questions, because I got to admit, I was a little nervous at the start, but thank you everybody for posting questions. Thank you for watching this show. Thank you, Advance Auto, for giving us this hour-long show for me to embarrass myself while I try to answer your automotive questions. I will put the actual numbers. It's been bothering me the entire show as far as parasitic draw testing. I need to cover that. But yeah, it's been a while since I've had to do one of those, so it's not fresh in my head. But I do have the actual facts that will be linked in the description. There will also be links to those videos that I mentioned, additional information, all kinds of stuff that can help you if I wasn't able to get to your question today. So please check the description for additional information. Once again, if you're watching this on YouTube, I cannot see those questions that are being posted there, so I will not be answering those. However, EricTheCarGuy.com is available for you 24/7, 365. So, and it has a lot of these articles and things and all this stuff that I've been mentioning throughout, saying, hey, the stuff is there. I did what I could to try to answer the bulk of the questions that I've been getting over the years in these articles. So it's a good one-stop place to go. Also, we have our forum that can also help you. And I'm going to do another one of these in 2 weeks, which will be the 22nd of July, which will be post-meetup, because this one is the one before the meetup. Those of you, I'll put a link in the description to this as well, that may be in the area of Southern Ohio. I have a meetup Saturday the 18th. You're more than welcome to come. There's a sign up on my website. There'll be a link to that in the description as well. I'm going to give some stuff away. We're going to hang out. In fact, I did some stuff today in the shop that is going to be a surprise to the people that show up to the meetup this year. So I hope to see you there. And Chris, I'm sorry if I miss you, but I'll be thinking about you, man. Anyway, I am going to, as I said, close this one out as soon as I can find the button to do it. Once again, thank you for watching. Thanks to Advance Auto. Be safe, have fun, stay dirty. I'll see you in a couple weeks. Thanks for watching.